Hey everyone, welcome to ProRPA.com. Today, we'll be talking about exception blocks. So, exceptions can occur at any point, at any time in a program, whether it's a process, whether it's an object, and we have already talked a lot about exceptions. We have talked about, how to handle that, about the, recover and resume stages. We have also talked about the concept of exception bubbling. And I can think of any other topic to talk about other than exception blocks, which is also a very important and a feature, I would say, based on my experience, is something that is provided specifically in Blue Prism RPA application, right? Like this is, I would say, specific to Blue Prism. And as I said, that, exceptions could occur at any point, at any place in a program, in a process, but the way to handle an exception could be different. So just for an example's sake, right? And I always think of the SAP application example on top of my head because that's what I deal with in my daytime job. But imagine that you're trying to launch into an application, right? Let's say launch the SAP application, which is locally installed in a system. Now I'm trying to open this enterprise application and somehow it didn't start, which actually happens pretty often. So my exception recovery mechanism would be to try launching the application again and then have some sort of a check whether the application actually was launched successfully or not. And if it has been launched, then only proceed to the next step, which is, let's say, login into the application. Now, let's say if something is wrong in the login process, right? Because bot actually works at a very, very high speed. There's a possibility that the login actually, because bot was writing the credentials, the login ID and the password, it somehow, the speed was so fast that somehow the processor of the system was not able to cope up with it, and because of which a few characters or even a single character either skipped or was written twice, or some lag, or could be any possible issue because of which the login credentials are not correct. Then if the login credentials are not correct, then my recovery mechanism would be to, let's say, retry another attempt by erasing the older credentials that were entered by the bot and try to log in again and then check whether the login was successful or not, right? So this is a totally different mechanism. Now, definitely the best or the ideal scenario would be to have a different process page for each of these sub-processes, like launch and login. But let's say if you have all that stuff in a single page itself, in a single, like the main page, right? Then you would want to have these different recovery mechanisms for different parts of the same program. Now, how would you accomplish that? And you know what? I understand the modularity is definitely most important aspect, but at the same time, sometimes you would want to club a few processes and make them as one, because if you make it really, really tiny, minuscule of code snippets or the processes, it might become huge number of sub processes, which might be difficult for a person to manage altogether or to consolidate in the end. So, right, you can, if you find that some processes are pretty much similar, then you would rather want to club them together. But again, modularity, that is that is sort of a decision that you have to make by yourself, right? So now getting back to the process, the concept of our exception blocks. So to cater to a specific stage, its own recovery mechanism, in its own exception recovery mechanism, we use exception blocks. So let's say I want to run this specific example that I think I've been using for the last blog posts as well. Like I have a start, I have some stages that I'm processing. Now I'm trying to log into an application. using these stupid username and password, which actually doesn't make any sense. Then I have some other stages, and then I'm simply ending it, right? I'll keep this anchor here. Now, if I try to run this, I've actually deliberately made an exception here. If I try to log into this, it says there's some exception that's happening. It cannot perform this this particular function, right? Now, a simple way which we have already discussed before is to have a recover and resume stage, and simply link them to the end, and the recover stage doesn't get added anywhere. So all I'm gonna do is, instead of failing out, goes to the recover, resume, and end, and the process ended successfully. It says completed instead of failed on the top, right? So that's one specific, like very generic exception. This is a very generic, it's like any exception that's gonna happen in here in this program, it's gonna be caught by this recovery mechanism, which I haven't put any stages in here, but definitely you should, because it doesn't make sense. But just to give the overview of the concept, I'm just putting the recover and the resume stages connected to each other. Now, suppose something is wrong in here, then I would rather want to like this recover mechanism, okay, makes sense. But if I want to have specific to the login functionality, any exception if that occurs, then I want to have, you know, the one that I was just describing about, like retrying it multiple times and stuff. What I would do is, I would just probably, you know, people usually, and that's again, it's sort of like how the overall look and feel of a Blue Prism program is, but people usually keep the default exception to sort of on the right side of the overall screen. And I would rather take this out, and I would have another recover and resume. Actually, you know what? I would rather want to show this to you. So imagine this. Right now I have two different recover and resume stages. It's not syntactically wrong. We can have multiple exception stages or handling stages in here. Which one do you think, because the login is gonna error out, which one is gonna run? Which one, or rather, let me actually rephrase this. Which error handling mechanism would actually catch the exception in this program? I don't know if your answer is recover 1, that is actually the correct one. Let's see. There it goes, resume, end, right? Because as you see, as per the naming convention, this is the default one. This is where what's gonna be triggered anytime an exception occurs in here. However, I want to have an explicit recovery mechanism only for this login stage. So in that case, I use this block, and all you gotta do is put the recover stage and the stage that you want, you know, from where the exception might occur, into the block. Once you did that, this block, you know, this highlight blue thing gets created. And now if you run this, you will see, actually just want to make it a little bit more better in terms of the overall look and feel. All right, now if I run it, you see here it goes in the recover to, resume to, end, right? So it's very important, because recover stage, and you know what, just imagine, like just understand this basic concept. Recover stage is not connected, right? Because it catches. If you remember, like there's a basketball analogy that I made, that if there is an exception, if you know, the exception is, let's say you're in a basketball court, you're playing basketball, and people, like the people from the competing team, have actually surrounded you, then you would want to throw the ball so that it can be caught by your team member, and he can you know, make the basket, he can make the goal, he can make the point for the team rather than you, because you cannot move any further, right? It's sort of a blocker. So and blockers are like the exceptions. Imagine like my internet is down in my software, right? So I cannot access it any further. Well, that's an exception. So I would rather want to trigger something like some sort of let's say Excel spreadsheet column marked with an X saying that I couldn't perform the duty at this specific time, or maintaining some notes, some log, something like that, right? Those are those exception handling mechanisms. So that is pretty much the same thing. If nobody is there, you have like your master player who's gonna take everything. But if you want to have a specific exception handling mechanism, then you would always use the block. And because the recover stage is not connected, so it has to be within the block. So imagine this: if you put it like this block is actually sort of useless. Any exception that would occur, it would look in this block whether there's a recovery mechanism. Since there isn't any, it's still gonna be caught by the default recovery mechanism. We can run this program again just to showcase how that looks like. Login, recover one, resume, and it's gonna end. Alright, so fairly simple process, but you have to understand that the exception blocks play a huge role, because I have had like really complex programs where several functionalities are maintained, and the client or whoever we are working for, they give us like, if this happens, this needs to be triggered, if this happens, this needs to be triggered, and so on. So all those recovery mechanisms may actually get a little overwhelming, may get a little bit complex, but you have to make sure that you use the exception blocks catering to the stages where that specific exception might occur, and the recover stage as to where like what all steps need to be followed to remediate the problem, right? So once the bot reaches here, then the arrow will do the job. You can have all the other stages and everything, they don't need to be in the blue block. It's not incorrect if you put them, it's fine. Like, let me do this. Imagine it that you have recover and resume stage both in here, right? It's not gonna make a difference. It's not gonna be wrong. It's not gonna be syntactically incorrect. It's just that just to get a better look and feel, this would have sufficed, right? Just the blue box for the recover and for the stage where the exception might occur and how you would want to perform the remediation steps. All right, so that is it for this week. Guys, I have some good news as well, that I was able to get my Udemy courses back online for both Blue Prism and for the UiPath RPA courses. And also we have the ServiceNow CRISPR Learning course. If you want to check that out, please do. The link for that is provided in the description. Also on the blog post. I always recommend to read the blog post first so that you get the basic idea, and then to confirm or to corroborate to the learning that to your understanding what you have tried to comprehend from the blog post, you always look into the video, and that actually sort of provides a validation that yes, what you did was, what you understood was correct, or if there was something way off, then it could also help you like sort of correct your knowledge and understanding. And we have those courses available on Skillshare as well. Everything is there. And I recently signed up for another website called Simpliv. We have the ServiceNow course already up in there. Please do check that out. And for the Blue Prism and for UiPath, that's still gonna be like, I believe in like 1 or 2 days it should be up and running. So whenever it does, I'll start putting the links for that in my videos as well. It's simpliv.com, SIMPLIV. And please feel free to reach out through your comments, shares, emails at info@prorpa.com, and let me know. I'm always available to help you out in any possible way. Thank you very much, and happy automating. Goodbye.